Hi, this is my brief introduction to working with the Meiji microscopes. I'm going to start by going through some never do's, some must do's, some always do's, some red flag warnings that if you don't follow these, you could get in trouble and be banned from using these microscopes. First of all, if you're going to carry the Meiji or any other microscope, you should hold it with two hands. One hand on the neck and one hand on the base. These are both very solid parts and a safe way to carry it. If you carry it by grabbing other pieces, you could damage the scope. So always two hands, always one under the base, always one on the neck. Next, if you plan on cleaning any of the lenses, the objectives, the oculars, or any other glass part, you are going to use lens paper and possibly lens cleaner. This will avoid scratching or damaging any of the lenses or any of the glass on this microscope. Third, you are going to always start observing with the lowest powered objective, which in this case is a 4x objective up here lens. It's the shortest, it has the lowest magnification, and it is the safest to start with to avoid damaging the microscope. When you do look through this one, it is the only objective in which you will turn the coarse focus knob. Here are the focus knobs. They're on both sides of the scope. This is the fine focus. You can see when I turn it, you cannot see the stage moving up and down, but when I move the coarse focus, it moves pretty significantly. You only need to use this on the lowest powered objective, the coarse focus, because we're using what's called a parafocal microscope. So if I focus at low power, I should pretty much be in focus at higher power, the higher objectives, and only will need to use the coarse focus to explore under higher magnification. Those are my warnings. Next, what will we start with? We don't start with observing. We start with what's called coloring. And coloring is optimizing the light source so it works best as centering what's called the condenser, which condenses the light and aims it through your sample. So first of all, let's turn this thing on. The light switch. Another important thing in illumination is the rheostat. This makes the light brighter and dimmer. Here is the lamp, and here is what's called the field diaphragm, which kind of like on an old camera has lets more or less light through. And let's go through the process and identify the parts we need as we go through. First of all, I'm going to get a slide with a sample already on it. I am going to make sure I'm on the lowest powered objective, the 4x. I'm going to lower my stage. I'm going to use these clips on the stage to hold my slide in place. And I'm going to raise it up a little. So now I have some adjustments to make. I can see that my slide is not over the light that's coming through. So I am going to use the stage adjustment knobs. They move this in two directions, the bottom knob left and right, the top knob forward and back. So it controls the X, Y coordinates for my slide until I see something in the light. I do see something, so I think I've got something under there. I am now going to try and focus it using the coarse focus knob. And I'm going up and up and something's coming into view. Something's coming into view. I'm using the coarse focus till it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to play with the fine focus knob. And that looks pretty good. But this is a chance to do one more adjustment for my personal, that fits me. This is a binocular microscope. It adjusts width for different people's eyes and heads. It also has one lens, one of the oculars can be adjusted, so we can adjust each one for different people's visions. So what I'm going to do is go back to my sample, which looked like it was in focus. I'm going to adjust this so I really only see one image. I'm going to close my right eye and focus for my left eye. Looks very sharp. I'm going to switch to my right eye, which looks a little fuzzy, so I'm going to adjust this knob on the ocular till that eye's in focus. Now I'm going to open it and say, looks pretty good. I'm in focus. I can go back to coloring. So I'm going to remove the slide, set it here for later use, and I am going to go down to what's called the field diaphragm, which controls the amount of light coming through by opening and closing this diaphragm. So I'm going to close it all the way down, so I just see a tiny dot of light coming through here. As I look below, I can see it coming through from above, and I'm going to go back to my microscope. And I see kind of a polygon in here of light, a very tiny dot, but it's a little fuzzy. So I'm going to go to the adjustment for the condenser, which raises and lowers the condenser. There's a knob on each side, and I am going to try and get that fuzz gone. I'm going to move it around a little and say, hey, that looks much sharper, much sharper. So I think I've focused. Now I'm going to see if it's centered. Is that little dot in the center? It kind of looks like it's in the center, but it's hard to tell. So I'm going to play with these screws, these adjustment screws. They're silver. There's one on each side. They come out at a 45-degree angle. And if I play with those a little, I can see my little dot of light moving, my little polygon of light moving around, and I'm guessing where the center is of my field of view. And I think I'm about there, but I can't tell for sure. So the next step is to open the field diaphragm till the light fills about 90%, maybe 80% of my field of view. Now I see a bright polygon of light with a little bit of a black border, and I can see, hey, I'm not quite in the center. So again, I'm going to use these adjustment screws and try and move that polygon around so that it's more centered. I got to move to the left here and down a little. Now I'm going to open it a little more. And I think I'm centered. I think I'm good. I think it's sharp. I think I'm centered. I am now going to open the diaphragm a little more so that black boundary is gone, that black edge, and my whole field of view is illuminated. And I have colored my scope for the low-powered objective. As I work through higher powered objectives, I would go through these steps for coloring each time, and you'll make little micro adjustments to improve things. But I'm going to say I am ready to go. All right, so next up, it's time to look at something. I'm going to use the same slide because it had kind of some cool stuff on it. Oh, wait a minute, one more thing. There is another adjustment knob here, the condenser iris diaphragm, which also affects how much light is coming through. You know, I remember on the scopes we used in school, there were a bunch of little circles of different size, and this kind of replicates that by opening and closing, again, the amount of light coming through, and this controls it. So I'm going to open that. To the left is pretty much closed, to the right is wide open. I'm going to put it at what I estimate about 75%. There's a little dot here, so I'm 3/4 of the way to the right. And it looks pretty bright, and that's going to be my starting point. Now I'm going to return my slide. And here we go. All right. So I'm going back to my sample. I'm going to play around, and I'm going to search and explore using the stage adjustment knobs. I'm going to move up and back and around until I say, oh, that is really interesting. And I'm going to say, oh, that is really interesting. I am going to focus a little more on what I think looks interesting. And if I think it's time to record what I'm saying, I'm going to keep my science notebook handy, and I am going to draw what I see while I'm working. I'm not going to try and remember. So if I want to write down things I'm noticing, things that seem important, I'm going to write while I look. If I want to draw what I've seen, I'm going to make the drawing while I have it under the scope, so I draw what I actually see, not what I remember. And I tend to like draw a little, look, draw a little, look, draw a little, and see if my drawing is matching what I'm seeing. I usually draw a circle to represent my field of view and make a sketch of what I'm seeing. All right, so notebook handy while observing. I'm in focus. I found something neat. I've kind of centered it in my field of view because when I go to the next objective, my field of view is going to shrink. So I need to think, hey, if things neat, something I want to see, I want it in the center. So when I get to a smaller field of view, it's still in the center. So let's move to the next objective, which is the 10x objective. And 10 times 10, I'm now looking at 100 power. And there it is still. It's almost in focus. And I only need to play now with the fine focus knob. The coarse focus knob is off limits. But fortunately, it's almost in focus, so I don't need to do much. I am going to raise this little item up a tiny bit. I want it centered because it's super cool, and let's imagine I'm drawing it, describing it. And I think, well, what about the next? Let's go to a higher magnification. Let's go to the 40x objective, which as you can see is almost touching the glass. So that's why it's dangerous to move the coarse adjustment, because I could jam this lens into the glass and damage it. So hopefully, well, it's a little fuzzy, but not much. Just barely adjusting the fine adjustment knob gets it in focus. I'm seeing all kinds of little cool stuff. Maybe nuclei. I don't know. But the other thing you will notice is now your depth of field has shrunk significantly, meaning only little layers are in focus. So to see different things, I will play with the fine focus knob, and that might bring different features in focus. Another thing that I should have said earlier is, the other thing I do when I'm looking is I'm adjusting the intensity of light with the rheostat here, because as you darken or brighten, different things will show up, and if it's too bright, it sort of washes out the color. So I play with this a lot while I'm observing, and I also play or use the iris diaphragm to adjust the light. And if I close the iris diaphragm down on this view, it sort of totally changes what I'm seeing. I see a lot more edges. So this increases the contrast. When I close it down, but it's not as well illuminated. So you kind of have to play with the rheostat and the iris diaphragm to kind of just say how much light is best. What is showing me the most? What is showing me what I want to see? All right, so finally, suppose we want to go to even higher magnification. Suppose we found something super cool, but we want to see it even better. Something very small. We may use oil. So this last objective is a 100x objective, and it is for use with oil. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to move my objectives so there's a big gap between the 40x and the 100x. I'm going to get a dropper. I'm going to get the approved oil. It's not 3-in-1 oil. It's whatever oil. It's the right oil for microscopes. And I am going to put one drop right over the illuminated area. And that's all it should take. Then I'm going to carefully move the 100x objective into place. I see a white band around it on this microscope. Sometimes I lose track of which objective is which. They are color coded. And if I get down to the level, I will see the lens go right into the oil. And now I'm going to take a peek again and just delicately move the fine focus knob. And oh my goodness. So now features are being magnified 1,000 times. The oil, it decreases the diffraction of light, so I'm getting I guess a cleaner view, and it's pretty fantastic. I'm not going to move, I'm going to move this a tiny bit, see. And once again, I'm going to explore with my rheostat, the brightness, and my iris condenser. And I think if I was really working, I would have my lab notebook out because I'm seeing great cool stuff, and I would make some sketches and some observations. So I am done with oil. In this quick demo, I'm going to move this back away so that it's split between the 40x and the 100x. I'm going to move this oily slide off, and I'm going to clean the oil. I'm going to lower the objective so I can, the stage, so I can get to this oily lens. I am going to take, no, not a Kim wipe. I am going to take lens paper. I'm going to fold it into a little strip, kind of a little, do some folding so I have kind of a multi-folded strip. And I'm going to wipe the oil off gently. And I see a sheen on my lens paper. Toss that one in the trash. I'm going to get another piece of lens paper. I'm going to wipe some more. I'm not really seeing a sheen now. I think we're getting most of the oil. I'm going to take one more piece of lens paper. Again, folding it up into strip, kind of a strip. I'm going to add a little bit of the lens cleaner fluid. I wish I had another dropper, but I don't, so I'm going to just carefully pour a little drop on here. And probably spill that now. Oh no. And now with a little the lens cleaner fluid, I'm going to wipe back and forth again. Let's see another view of that. Go back and forth, wiping action. And I'm going to keep doing that till I'm convinced there's no oil on this lens. And I'm going to, for this video, I'm going to be convinced that there's no oil. But I'm going to give it a little dry off. Let's give it a dry. And I don't see, you know what? I see a little oil. So let's get up here, and I may have to repeat those steps again. So I'm going to keep going till I don't see any evidence of oil on this. But let's say I did. I'm now going to get maybe a Kim wipe or something and wipe off the slide. And I'll get some cleaner and clean that up. So, because we don't want any oil contamination hanging around, so we'll clean that thoroughly, and we may be wrapping up this presentation. I think we've covered everything I can think of to cover, so I'm going to stop.